Okay, here's a sign of the times we're living in. Just one day before Donald Trump's lawyers made the preposterous claim that he's immune from prosecution for trying to steal the election, we learned he's also an unindicted co-conspirator for trying to do the same thing in two states, two pretty important ones, Arizona and Michigan. That's not to mention he's also been charged for the same scheme in Georgia. And as my next guest notes, quote, all of these charged acts came together in the January 6th insurrection, an insurrection that Trump incited to disrupt the lawful count of electoral votes, an attempt to hold on to power, propelled by these states' slates of illegal fake electors. And yet, here we are, at a point where it will be up to the justices to decide if he somehow is above the law. As our friend Andrew Weissman reminded me yesterday, the fact that we're even at this point means that our democracy is in a very perilous place.
I mean, I know it sounds like hyperbole, but I think your opening is so correct that we are essentially, as Neil put it, one vote away from sort of the end of democracy as we know it, with checks and balances.
It's a pretty stark reminder. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He's also a U.S. Senate candidate. So the tweet I just read was a part of a longer thread you posted about the immunity case, and you ended it with, quote, if the justices instead send the case back to the lower court as a means of stalling, the flaw is not with the Constitution or the court itself, but with the character of the justices serving on the court. There's a lot packed in there. So talk to me about what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean is the justices know exactly what they're doing. They know the danger of the argument of immunity, essentially that if a president is held immune from committing crimes, and particular crimes while in office that are designed to hold on to power after losing, that's the end. They can't go there. But what they can do, if they have just a political focus on this, is they can delay. They can send this back to the lower court. They've already delayed. They've shown in the past they can move with great speed when they want to. When they wanted to make sure that he could appear on ballots, they struck down the ability of secretaries of state to take him off the ballot. They can move fast when they want to. They can also delay when they want to. And here it seems they're very purposeful in their delay. But I also found it quite ironic. I don't know if this point was ever brought to the justice's attention. During the first impeachment trial, Trump's lawyers argued that any act he undertook while in office that he believed was in the national interest, or his own interest for that matter, could not be impeached. He had to be prosecuted instead. And here they are making exactly the opposite argument in the court.
It's really, I mean, the reference to character in there and the delay, I think, is so important for people to understand. So thank you for explaining that. You know, Trump's listening, I should say. We were listening on Thursday to the hearings. Trump's lawyer suggested a president could not be prosecuted for assassinating a political rival. We've heard that before. An assassination would be an official act. His lawyer said a president could be immune after ordering a coup. I mean, there were a lot of also hypotheticals that the justices presented, and Trump's legal team seemed to suggest it was all fine. I mean, what were you thinking when you were listening to the arguments on Thursday?
You know, the same thought we've had over and over and over again, which is, are we really at this point? We cannot lose our sense of shock at just how low the bar has become. Is it really possible that the Supreme Court is entertaining the idea that a president could not only commit a criminal act, but could assassinate an opponent, could engage in a military coup, and somehow this would not be subject to prosecution? There'd be no accountability. Is that really where we are? And you started the segment, and I'm so glad you did, talking about the enablers. The reason why this is all possible is because of these enablers. And, you know, my takeaway from all of this, it's true of the justices when I was talking about character. It's true of the Bill Barrs and the Mitch McConnells. If their oath of office doesn't mean anything, if they refuse to give it any content that is based on right and wrong or the truth, then none of it works. The Constitution is not strong enough if people who are taking that oath don't think it really means anything.
To your point on the enablers, there's enablers everywhere, right? Potential enablers everywhere, including in Congress. And, you know, we saw that happen, of course, around January 6th. There are some new protections put in place. But Mike Johnson, who's now the Speaker of the House, was somebody who was definitely an enabler. Are you fearful that he could play that role with even more power this time around?
Without a doubt. You know, I think the nightmare scenario is that instead of like the last election where President Biden won quite handily and in many battleground states, that it comes down to a single state and a very narrow margin. That is the most dangerous scenario. The good news, though, the positive scenario is if Donald Trump is voted down again and repudiated again, I do think the Mitch McConnells, all of the neighbors on that list, decide they need to move on because he's a loser. They keep losing with him. They obviously won't move on from him because it's in the interest of the country. Bill Barr made that clear. That's not his priority. But I think they will be forced to move on because he keeps causing their party to lose. And we all have that obligation in November to make sure that the country can move on, that the Republican Party goes back to being a party of a conservative ideology, a place where Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger have a home. It's on all of us to bring about an end to this terrible chapter of our history.
Even before then, I mean, there are members of the Republican Party who are threatening Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, threatening to oust Speaker Johnson. And the real possibility is that an alternative could be worse. I mean, this is a crazy time we're living in. Would you support him, or vote for him as Speaker if that were up to you? Or do you think other Democrats would?
I think what would likely happen if they go forward with this motion to try to unseat him because he brought Ukraine funding to the floor, you would have a significant enough group of Democrats who simply walk away and don't vote, which frankly would probably be the right result. I don't think it does the Speaker any good to have Democrats responsible for saving him, but Republicans would essentially be voting for the Speaker. It's just that the vote threshold would be lowered so that the votes of the crazies, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Gosars, et cetera, are not preventing the House from governing in any way.
I wanted to briefly, we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to ask you about Project 2025, because that's a huge issue. You know, one of the things I've been talking about a bit is that it includes plans to dismantle the Justice Department and how important that is. You have sat in so many different seats on all sides of the different branches of government. Why is that so troubling?
Well, if you can effectively weaponize the Justice Department to go after your opponents, or, in the case of Donald Trump, make legitimate criminal charges against you go away, it means we have no rule of law. The whole country is founded on the idea that we're a nation of laws, that we're not a nation of an individual who holds power, that everybody's accountable. And I would say this, too, because we're all desperate for good news. It is remarkable that in a courthouse in New York City, 12 ordinary citizens are going to decide whether a former president is guilty or innocent. That is still possible in this country, and we should take pride in that and have some confidence in that. We want to make sure that remains true in the future.
Absolutely. Jury of your peers. That's how our system works. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.